Alright guys, this recording is to give you a little bit of extra direction for how to complete your Unit 2 assessment that you will see starting in Lesson 2.11. So we're going to take a look at the Unit 2 assessment together. I'm going to go through the directions and hopefully it will help make a little bit more sense. So when we take a look at that Unit 2 assessment page, you'll see that we are going to present an explanation of how author's perspective, tone, and diction affect the way that you can communicate your ideas and arguments. Throughout Unit 2, we have read different types of literature that will help take a look at perspective, tone, and diction and how those three things affect what exactly we're saying in the story. So you looked at a humorous essay, you looked at a short story, you looked at a news article, you looked at a historical text, you looked at a video of a historical text, you look at a historical eulogy, all kinds of different genres of writing, and they all used diction in a different way that help to address the tone. So just to recap how they all fit together, remember that your author's perspective is based on their background experiences. So their ideas, their beliefs, their values are going to affect the way that they view a subject. So if they're going to be writing about a subject, and we're just going to stick with, Martin Luther King Jr. because that's one of the more recent things that you've read with Letter to Birmingham Jail. His perspective is that he is against segregation and he wants civil rights to happen. That is his belief. About civil rights. He wants civil rights and equality for all. So because of that perspective, it's going to affect his attitude about what he writes. He's going to be very serious. He's going to be very sincere about what he writes in terms of segregation. So his diction, his word choice, is going to work to create that tone. He's going to have a very sophisticated, very formal tone to help, or diction, to help create that serious tone. So depending on what the subject is, depending on who your author is, and what you want your reader to get out of the piece that you're writing, you're going to develop your word choice and your diction in order to complement what that perspective and that tone is. What you need to do for this assessment is to think about all of those things that we've looked at in Unit 2, and you're going to create a lesson. And the reason I'm having you create a lesson is because the best way to show that you understand something is to be able to teach it to somebody else. So if we look at step 1, the first thing that you need to do is to go back through the lessons to focus on perspective, tone, or diction. You can pick one term that you want to focus on. So lesson 2.1 was just an introduction lesson that gives you information on all three of those terms. Lesson 2.2 talked about tone in a humorous essay. 2.3, you responded to that humorous essay, The Plot Against the People. 2.4 was the short story, End of Claire We Created. There was the short story Connection, which was the girl trapped in water for 55 hours. And then 2.6 and 2.7 focus on Letter to Birmingham Jail, and 2.9 was historical eulogy. So you'll see that for each of those readings, we kind of focus on a different thing. Plot Against the People, we really focused on the tone. We focused on perspective with the EngIIA We Created. We focused on diction with Letter to Birmingham Jail, and then tone again for the historical eulogy. So take a look at each of those lessons and pick, do you want to focus on perspective, tone, or diction? Pick one of those three terms. So once you've figured out which of the three terms you would like to focus on, you are now going to make a list of everything that you learned about that term. So everything that you know and understand about author's perspective, or everything that you know and understand about diction, or everything that you know and understand about tone. Pick one and write everything that you know about that term. So here's some guiding questions. These are some questions that you can use. So if you're going with tone, first of all, what is tone? What does it mean? And what are some examples of how word choice can affect your tone? All right, for diction, what is diction, and what are some examples of how an author's choice of syntax and wording can affect their purpose and can coordinate with the purpose? And then for perspective, how does perspective differ from purpose? How can you determine what the author's perspective is? And what does the perspective, or how does the perspective affect the meaning in writing? What are some examples? So once you've picked your term, Just find the questions that go with each, and this is for step 2. If you can answer these questions, okay, then you're good for step 2. And this is all just pre-writing, preparing things that you can do. So once you've done that, now step 3 is to really think about how could you teach this to somebody else. So for example, if I wanted to go with diction, and I'm able to say that diction is the word choice and syntax that a writer uses, okay, that affects the tone of the work. And some choices about how the choice of syntax and words can coordinate their purpose, well, I know if they're trying to persuade me to do something, or they're trying to persuade me to think that, whatever the topic is a good idea, then their word choice is probably going to be influential. They're probably going to use positive wording to, describe the subject so that I think that it's a good thing. And they're probably going to use some sophisticated syntax because, they don't want to sound like they're not educated on the subject, so they're going to want to sound intelligent and formal, so they're probably going to use some intelligent and formal syntax as well as positive and sophisticated wording as well. So if I'm able to understand that for myself, now how can I show this, or how can I explain this to somebody that would not know? And that's where steps 3 come into play. So for example, I wanted you to learn how word choice affects a tone. So we read Plot Against the People, and you picked out word choice that was humorous. Okay, and then you used your own humorous wording in a reply to practice using that same tone, that same diction. So what could you have somebody do to practice or to learn the term that you're focusing on? And once you figure that out, this is what you're really going to complete. Okay, you want to try to come up with some kind of lesson. All right, so first of all, what is an overview of what you want your student to do? Okay, how long do you think it will take? Are you going to need any materials? Are you going to give them a worksheet? Are you going to have them read something or do something? And then what do you want them to be able to do or to be able to tell you by the end? Then the next thing is just a listing of what you would do and what you would want your student to do to learn what you're teaching them. Okay, so you're going to submit this chart, okay, and these lists to me. That's what you will submit. And then what we're going to do, because the lesson 2.12, the presentation lesson, falls on a live learning day, what I'm going to have you do is come to class and you're going to present the information from, this should say step 3, from step 3 that you would want to include in the lesson. You don't have to teach it. I just want you to be able to explain to me and explain to your peers, this is how I would teach it to somebody so that they can understand it too. And then your step 6 is that you're going to actually view each other's presentations and give a little constructive feedback on it. So again, all I really want you to do, and I don't want you to make this more complicated than it needs to be, pick one of the terms, perspective, tone, or diction. Go back through the lessons to remind yourself what it means. Okay, in step 2, you're able to explain and answer the questions that goes with the term that you picked. And then how would you explain it to somebody else so that somebody else can understand it too? And that's really it. If you can do those things, then you can successfully complete the Unit 2 assessment. Keep an eye out for your email, because I will tell you what time during our live learning session that you will be asked to give your presentation. I'll give you about 5 minutes to be able to explain your lesson and how you would teach this to somebody else. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to ask. But hopefully this overview and explanation helped to make a little bit more sense for you. So good luck.